Hey everyone, welcome back to Bunny Call. This is part 2 of In the Flesh, the final part. Things seem fairly normal so far. I mean, it's all it is a guy developing a game. He's an awful guy, sure. But nothing like paranormal has happened so far. We'll see how it goes. Let's continue. Matt woke up feeling strangely queasy. Usually morning tummy trouble was a symptom of his having drunk too much the night before. He had polished off that bottle of wine last night, but still, it hadn't added up to more than 3 glasses worth. He shouldn't be hungover. Coffee, he decided, was the solution, as it was to many of life's problems. He dragged himself into the kitchen and put on a pot to brew. Though the thought of eating was unpleasant, he dropped a slice of whole wheat bread into the toaster, in case his stomach's emptiness was the cause of its unrest. Once the brewing and toasting were complete, he sat down at the kitchen table. 1 sip of coffee and 1 bite of toast later, his stomach roiled violently. Without even having made a conscious decision to move, he found himself leaning over the kitchen sink, retching up not only the toast and coffee, but seemingly everything else he had consumed over the past few days. He rinsed out the sink, wet a paper towel, and used it to dab his sweaty forehead. His body couldn't have chosen a worse time to get sick. He couldn't miss work. He had to fix the game. He would fix it by lunchtime, he decided. Then he could take the rest of the day off to rest and recover. It was also almost noon, and Matt's stomach was still roiling like a storm at sea. He had moved the wastebasket next to his desk so he could hurl into it as needed. Eating lunch was unimaginable. He had been working non-stop to repair the game with no success. He had consulted every manual he owned. He had read extensively from a variety of specialized sites on the internet. He had even put in a phone call to one of his old professors from grad school, but it was all to no avail. Matt wasn't used to feeling stupid or like a failure, but now he was experiencing both of these unpleasant, unaccustomed feelings. It was like Springtrap, his own creation, had bested him. There was a knock on his office door. "Come in," Matt said. He hoped it was either someone to save him or someone to put him out of his misery. "Hiya, Matt." It was neither. It was Gary, the head of his department, who was guaranteed in any given situation to A, be of no help whatsoever, and B, deepen his misery. Matt gritted his teeth. "Hey, Gary." Matt hoped the signs of his distress weren't visible, but he was pretty sure they were. He was breathing heavily and sweating like he'd just run a marathon. The intensity of his nausea made it difficult to speak. He was afraid that if he opened his mouth, something other than words would come out. Gary sat down in the chair across from Matt's desk. He was, as always, impeccably groomed, his hair in a perfect Ken doll part, his expensive suit wrinkle-free. "Have you been on social media the past couple of days?" He grinned, flashing his perfectly straight white teeth. "Kids are going nuts over this game, some adults, too. It's going to be huge, Matt, huge." "Huge," Matt echoed, trying to smile but failing. His mouth refused to go up at the corners. "So, how's it going?" Gary asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Is everything moving forward like it needs to? Because I tell you, that deadline is looming." Matt didn't need to be told that the deadline was looming. "It's going great," he said, hoping he sounded more convinced than he felt. "Good to hear," Gary said, like he was trying to decide whether he believed him. "Anything I can help you with?" "No, it's going great," Matt repeated, his voice getting a little high-pitched and whiny the way it did when he was nervous. "Excellent," Gary said, getting up from the chair. "Can't wait to see what you've put together. You'll be ready to present it on Friday, right?" "Friday, you bet," Matt said, gulping. Gary left, closing the door behind him. Matt put his head down on his desk in despair. He had started the morning feeling confident in his ability to solve the problem, but the skies had darkened. Matt took his lunch break, not to eat, but just to get out of the office and try to clear his head. He walked the half-block to Gus's, a dimly lit dive bar that reminded him of the cheap places he used to frequent in college. Maybe he could just sip on a soda to settle his stomach. Also, Gus's wouldn't be crowded at lunchtime, and maybe the combination of a soda and the dark and the quiet would help him think. Matt placed his order, and Gus filled it. Matt wished that all relationships could be that simple. He sipped his cola and thought, okay, so there was no time for a major redesign, but was there anything else he could do that might save the game and save his job? Matt looked around the room. In the corner were a couple of old video game cabinets that had probably been there since the games were new in the 80s. He stared at the demo screen of an old maze game, watching a weird yellow ball guy being pursued by candy-colored ghosts. Then the thought hit him. I can just program it in a new Springtrap, one that follows the path it's supposed to. The old program is so messed up it won't have any impact on the game anyway. No one will even know it's there. Why hadn't he thought of this before? The problem was as good as solved. He ate a handful of bar peanuts and finished his soda. Something about the combination of saltiness and fizziness soothed his stomach. Then he went back to the office to build a new Springtrap, one that followed the path it was supposed to follow. And this time, Matt wouldn't antagonize the rabbit. He had learned his lesson. It hadn't been easy hacking into the company's computer, but Gene had done it. Maybe it was a sign that things were looking up. Life hadn't been going great for him lately. He had gotten fired from his job on the nerd team at Good Deal Electronics store, and had had to move back in with his parents until he could find something else, which hadn't happened yet. It was depressing being a grown man living in your childhood bedroom, looking at those old trophies from Scholars Bowl and Math Team, and realizing how little they meant. That was why he'd been packing on the weight. Depression and Mom's home cooking were a dangerous combination. But now he had at least one thing going for him. He had his own early copy of Springtrap's Revenge. Because of Gene's superior hacking skills, he was going to be one of the first people, if not the first person, to play the game. And with Gene's superior gaming skills, he might very well become the first person to beat the game too. And that would be an accomplishment. He put on the VR headset. He was ready to play. Gene created an avatar that looked like his ideal self, like he would look again once he got back on his feet. Getting into the computer system and getting this game was a good sign, Gene thought. A success that would be the first in a series of successes. Once his avatar was created, Gene found himself standing at the end of a dark hallway. He walked to the opposite end. There was a door on the left and a door on the right. Randomly, he chose the one on the right. He found himself in a room with 4 doors. Clearly, he had to choose one. And from his past experiences with FNAF games, he knew that the wrong choice would result in a jump scare and a game over screen. He chose the door on the left. He took a deep breath, turned the knob, and pulled. It was clear. He breathed a sigh of relief, took a few steps forward, and found himself in another dark hallway. He walked forward until he slammed into a wall. He had to say, the VR features were impressive. When his avatar hit the wall, he could feel the bump. He felt his way to the right, where there was a passage forward, and continued feeling his way along the wall. Between the limited perspective offered by the VR and the lack of light, this maze was obviously no joke. But if there was one area in his life where Gene had full confidence in himself, it was gaming. He was going to find his way out. It was strange. It seemed like part of the fun of negotiating the maze would be avoiding creepy characters who lurked around corners and jumped out when least expected. But so far there were no creepy characters in sight. Not even the title character. The game was called Springtrap's Revenge, so where was Springtrap? Gene Jr., dinner's ready, a voice called from the kitchen, breaking Gene's immersion in the game. Stuffed peppers and macaroni and cheese. I'll be there in a minute, Ma, Gene yelled back, but he knew it would be longer than a minute. He wasn't leaving the game until he found Springtrap. Besides, if there was one thing he knew about Ma, it was that she wasn't going to let him go hungry. If he took too long to come to the table, she'd make him a plate and bring it to his room, so he could shovel in his dinner while he played. Gene saw something green sticking out from behind a corner of the maze. He went to investigate, steeling himself for a jump scare, but the version of Springtrap he found, while undoubtedly scary, was incapable of jumping out at anyone. Springtrap's body lay motionless and flat on its back, its abdomen flayed open. Springs and gears protruded from the wound. Its eyes were open and empty. Gene thought it might be a trick, that any second the green rabbit would spring to life and grab Gene's avatar's ankle. But the rabbits just lay there. Gene made his avatar nudge it with his foot. But it was inert. It seemed to be game over for Springtrap. But that didn't make any sense. If this game was about Springtrap getting revenge, why would the supposed main character be dead in the beginning? Unless the plot turned into some kind of ghost story? Gene Jr., your dinner's getting cold. I'll be there in a minute, Ma. Just let me finish filling out this job application, Gene called. He knew if she thought he was applying for a job, she'd stay off his back for a few more minutes. He had to figure out what was going on in Springtrap's Revenge, and the only way to do it was to look at the code. It was time to put those superior hacking skills to use again. After a few commands, he was in, but what he found made no sense. According to the code, Springtrap had been extracted from the very game that bore his name in the title. The program that initiated the extraction was inexplicably called itsaboy.exe. Matt was hungry, ravenous. He was sitting at a table for two at Ye Olde Steakhouse. His companion at the table was Madison, who, thankfully, was as pretty as her pictures, with shiny chestnut hair and big doe-like brown eyes. This was their first date, but Matt was having a hard time focusing on the required chit-chat because he was so hungry. He realized he had scooted the breadbasket in front of him and had been mindlessly gnawing his way through the rolls. "I'm sorry, would you like some bread?" he asked, forcing himself to push the basket in her direction. "No thanks," she said with an awkward grin. "I'm watching my carbs." "Not me, obviously," Matt said, trying for humor as he tore off another chunk of bread with his teeth. What was this? Roll number 4? Number 5? The server appeared, and before she could even ask them for their order, Matt said, "Porterhouse steak, very rare, with a loaded baked potato and creamed spinach on the side. And let's get a refill on this breadbasket, too." "And for you, ma'am?" The server turned to Madison. Matt figured this was a subtle jab at him, a reminder that he was supposed to have let the lady order it first. But he was too far hungry to care about etiquette. He was so hungry it felt like a medical emergency. "The Cobb salad, please, with blue cheese dressing on the side," Madison said. Matt hoped the server would hurry back with that new breadbasket before he decided to start trying to eat the tablecloth. "You know, I've always wondered," he said. "You girls always order salads when you're out on dates. Like you don't want a guy seeing you eat too much. When you go out with your girlfriend or something, do you order something else? Like a big plate of ribs or something?" Ribs, Matt thought. Ribs sound delicious. Madison smiled. "It depends on how hungry I am. Sometimes when I go out with my best friend, we split a burger and fries." "You split a burger and fries?" Matt said. "That's just like an appetizer or something." Madison giggled. "It's really not. Half a cheeseburger is plenty. And girls can't eat like you guys can. If I look at a piece of cheesecake, I gain 5 pounds. Cheesecake. For dessert, Matt definitely wanted cheesecake. He rarely ordered dessert, but he was going for it tonight. "Stop," he told himself. "Stop obsessing over food and notice your date." "Well," he said finally, "whatever you're doing, you should keep on doing it, because you look fantastic." "Thanks," she said, smiling. Good, Matt thought. When in doubt, give a compliment. It always smooths things over. When the food arrived, Matt felt like a starving lumberjack. The rare steak sat in an amazing pool of blood, and when Matt cut into it, the meat was a purpley red. "I think I just heard it moo," Madison said, as Matt held a dripping chunk of meat to his lips. "Well, you won't hear it long, because it's going to be in my belly," Matt said. The nearly raw meat was delicious, so intense that Matt closed his eyes as he chewed. He ignored the vegetables on his plate and sawed into the meat over and over again, cutting off big chunks that filled his cheeks as he chewed. He resented how the knife and fork slowed down his eating. Really, it would make much more sense to pick up the steak and rend off chunks with his canines. That's what they were for, weren't they? Table manners, all rules of etiquette, really were just ways to delay the body getting what it needed, and Matt's body needed this meat. He wasn't quite sure when he had picked up the large T-bone from the center of the steak and started gnawing at it, growling to himself with animal pleasure. But then he felt Madison's eyes on him. She was sitting across from him, holding a forkful of lettuce in midair, staring like he was an exhibit at the zoo. Then he felt the eyes of the other customers at the other tables as well. He set down the bone. "I went to the doctor the other day," he lied. "He said I was terribly anemic. I must have needed this red meat, something fierce." "You must have," Madison said. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her phone, and looked at it for a second. "Oh no," she said. "I just got a text from my roommate. My cat is sick. I have to go. Thanks for dinner." She didn't stick around long enough to hear Matt say, "I'll call you." Why couldn't he satisfy this bottomless hunger? His steak was gone now, and so were the baked potato and creamed spinach. He reached across the table for the rest of Madison's mostly uneaten salad. It would be a shame for it to go to waste. As Matt got undressed for his bedtime shower, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the bathroom mirror, and almost didn't recognize himself. His belly was definitely bigger. He was bloated from the enormous dinner he had eaten at the steakhouse, but this seemed like more than a standard post-meal bloat. Matt looked at his handsome face and shrugged. What were a few more pounds, he was still looking good. And historically, being a man with a little extra weight was a sign of prosperity. Matt woke up with a goal that was crystal clear in its simplicity, to make it to the bathroom before it was too late. He threw off his covers and ran, then spewed the remains of last night's huge and expensive dinner into the porcelain bowl. He retched and gagged long after there was nothing left to bring up. Strangely, he still felt bloated afterward, and his belly was still distended. Was this some kind of weird virus, the symptoms of which were cycles of extreme nausea, followed by extreme hunger? If it was a virus, it was certainly hanging on for a long time. He would have to ask people at work if they had heard of anyone else having the symptoms. "Matt, are you feeling okay?" Jamie asked as they sat in the conference room waiting for a meeting to start. Her brow was knitted in a look of concern, but Matt doubted that it was genuine. It's just this bug I'm having a hard time fighting off," Matt said. The smell of the coffee in the room, usually one of his favorite aromas, was nauseating. "I'm either nauseated or starving, and I'm bloated and gassy. Do you know about any viruses with those symptoms going around?" "I don't," Jamie said, "and I know about all the bugs because I have kids in school who bring them home." She smiled. "Seriously, though, maybe you should have a doctor check you out. You're definitely bloated, and your color doesn't look good. You're kind of yellowish, like you might have jaundice. Maybe you should get some blood work done and get your liver function checked just to be on the safe side." "Oh, doctors don't know anything," Matt said, and neither did Jamie. He didn't even know why he had bothered to ask her anything. Gary walked in, which had the negative effect of starting the meeting, but the positive effect of ending any other conversation. "Good morning," Gary said, taking his place at the head of the conference table. "Well, the release date is in 2 weeks, and the reviews from early screening copies of the games are in. And the results are..." He looked down at his notes. "Mixed." Jamie let out a little sigh. "According to the reviewers," Gary said, "the storyline is good, the gameplay is challenging, and the number of jump scares is consistent with what FNAF fans expect." He cleared his throat. However, every single reviewer agreed on one fact. The AI design of Springtrap is sloppy and not up to the game's usual standards. Gary didn't call out Matt by name, but he might as well have. With Springtrap's bizarre series of regenerations and deaths after Matt had left him to wander in the maze, Matt had really needed to rush to create a new AI to plug into the game. But he'd been so confident that despite the last-minute nature of the work, he had still done a good job. Well, good enough, anyway. "Oh, is that what the reviewers are saying?" Matt said. His face heated up with anger. "Are you going to tell me who these people are, or are they really just you?" Hey, Gary said, holding his hands up as if defending himself. "No need to get all riled up. I'm just saying that in this competitive climate, nobody can afford to be doing anything but their best work." "I always do my best work," Matt said, raising his voice. "In fact, I would be doing some more of it right now if you weren't wasting my time in this pointless meeting." Jamie reached out to touch Matt's arm, but he jerked it away. "I know these meetings take time away that you would use to work and think," Gary said. "And I promise this one won't last long, but after the meeting, Matt, as you are working and thinking, I would suggest that one of the things you should think about is the appropriate way to talk to your supervisor." Matt drove home in a rage. He broke the speed limit by double digits and powered through red lights. "Let a cop pull me over," he thought. "Just let him." Both anger and hunger were gnawing at him, even though he was so bloated and gassy that it felt like a pinprick to his stomach would cause it to pop like a balloon. When he drove by a burger joint, the smell of hot grease lured him to turn in. He went through the drive-thru and ordered a double bacon cheeseburger, large fries, and chocolate shake, food that he would generally dismiss as too unhealthy for human consumption. Not wanting to have to slow down his eating because he was also driving, he pulled into a parking space and devoured the greasy meat and carbs like a ravenous wolverine. His hunger subsided some. His anger did not. When he got to his apartment, Jason was packing video games from his shelf into a cardboard box. Other filled boxes were scattered across the floor. "What's going on?" Matt asked, though he had a feeling he knew. "Listen, man," Jason said, not looking up at him. "Megan finally told me what you did. She said she almost didn't because we're roommates, but then she decided that I needed to know. She said you hit on her when you were supposed to be getting to know Eva. You gave her your number when you knew she was on a date with me. Not cool, man." "Okay," Matt said. "If you want me to apologize, I apologize." He didn't see the need for an apology, though. He hadn't been trying to forcibly take Megan away from Jason. He'd just been protecting her and presenting her with choices. Jason shook his head. "See, that's just it. I don't want you to apologize. I want you to stop being a jerk. But unfortunately, I don't see that ever happening. So I'm moving out. You spent our whole meal the other night talking about how prosperous and successful you are, right before you left us with the bill. You don't need my help with the rent. You can afford this place without me." "I can," Matt said, "but I want you to stay." He didn't know why, but he had a sudden, desperate need not to be alone. It was a vague but persistent feeling that if he were left alone, something bad would happen. "Yeah, and Eva wanted you to be nice to her, but She didn't get that wish either. She's a super nice person, Matt. She deserved better. Yeah, you fixed me up with the girl with the great personality, Matt said, laughing bitterly. You kept the pretty one for yourself. Jason threw up his hands. Okay, look, I can't have this conversation right now. I'm leaving. Tonight I'm borrowing a truck from a buddy. I'll come back in the morning and get my stuff when you're at work. I think it's best if you and I stay out of each other's way for a while. Jason grabbed his keys and was out the door. Matt got a beer from the fridge and sat down on the couch. How had things gotten so bad so fast? He didn't really need to ask. He knew the answer. It was the rabbit. He couldn't explain it, but somehow the rabbit was to blame. The beer tasted sour and unpleasant, and Matt felt the sickly blooming of a headache above his right temple. He reached up to massage his head and felt a hard knob pushing against his scalp. Was it possible he had gotten hit in the head hard enough for a knot to form and didn't remember it? And if he didn't remember it, what did that mean? That he had some kind of brain injury that was causing him to lose his mind? Or maybe it was his physical health, not his mental health, that he should be worried about. Matt needed someone to talk to about his problems, but there was no one. Hannah had abandoned him, a string of ungrateful girlfriends had abandoned him, and now Jason, his best friend, had abandoned him. As if that weren't all bad enough, he was unappreciated and criticized at work. Perhaps such loneliness was the sad price to pay for his brilliance. Like so many geniuses before him, he was isolated and misunderstood. For the first time in his adult life, Matt found himself crying real tears. Matt couldn't fasten his pants. Yesterday they'd been a tight fit, but still a fit. But today they were impossible. Today he had lounged around in pajama pants all day, but now, trying to fit into real pants, it was apparent that his belly had swollen such that his size 34 waistline was only a fond memory. He tried another, more forgiving pair, and then another, all to no avail. The discarded pants lay strewn on his bed. The problem was that he had a date in a few minutes, and while he did find most rules of etiquette to be stupid and oppressive, he did accept the fact that a public date generally required one to wear pants. He dug through his closet and found a size 36 in the very back. He stepped into them, but they wouldn't fasten over his belly. Finally, he pulled them down below the mountainous swelling and managed to zip them up. The buttons still wouldn't close, but he managed to secure them with a belt. It wasn't the ideal situation, but it would have to do. Matt had arranged to meet his new date, another internet acquaintance, in a bar. This way, he reasoned, if the date turned out to be as disastrous as his last ones, at least he wouldn't have to pay for dinner. The bar was one of those sleek, modern places favored by young urban professionals, all chrome and glass and indirect lighting. Walking in, he caught his reflection in one of the place's many mirrors and was immediately startled. His belly was so bloated that the buttons of his shirt were straining, the gaps between the buttons revealing his yellowish skin. His face and hair were also drenched in sweat. And was it his imagination, or was his hair also getting thinner? Still, Matt knew he had a lot more going for him than any of the losers in this bar. Emma, that was the new girl's name, right? Emma was lucky to be going out with him. He didn't recognize her at first. She was sitting at a table alone and giving him a little wave. Her face was pretty, like he remembered it being on the dating site, and so was her honey blonde hair. But the picture she used on the site must have been a good 25 pounds ago. The girl was chunky. It was a good thing he hadn't committed to taking her out to dinner. He probably couldn't afford to feed her. Oh no! Oh no! As if there was any doubt that this guy is the worst. Oh no! Oh, he's awful. Oh, he's the worst. Sorry, I kind of broke the immersion there. Just thought I'd comment on that. Well, it was too late to slip out now. She'd already spotted him. He pasted on a smile and walked up to the table. Emma? Matt. She smiled broadly and gestured for him to sit down. So, what are we drinking? Appletini? One fruity girl drink coming up. Let me go converse with the barkeep. He went to the bar and ordered the girl drink for Emma and a martini for himself. It was strong, but he had a feeling he was going to need it to get through this date. Yum, thank you, Emma said, when he set down the toxic-looking green drink in front of her. Thanks for picking out this place. It's really cool. I'm ashamed to admit I don't get out much. Most nights after work, I just put on my pajamas and watch Netflix. And eat a gallon of ice cream, Matt thought. Oh, no. But he just smiled and nodded. Yeah, sometimes I just end up hanging out with my roommate and playing video games, Matt said. Then he remembered Jason wasn't his roommate anymore. No need to tell her that, though. He had already decided he was never going to see her again. Well, you're a video game developer, she said, sipping her cocktail. So when you hang out and play video games, that's like research, right? He managed a strained smile. Something was happening in his abdomen. Pressure was building in an unpleasant way, almost like a force was pushing his belly from the inside. He took a sip of his martini, which hit his stomach like battery acid. He must have grimaced because Emma said, "Are you okay?" Sure, he said. But he wasn't. He felt like he was going to burst like an overripe berry. He couldn't sit here and make polite chit-chat. But let me just go ahead and tell you right now that this isn't going to work out, so you enjoy your drink, I'm going to say goodnight. Now wait just a second, Emma said. You've barely even talked to me. It's way too soon to figure out whether you think I'm an interesting person or not, so tell me, how do you know this isn't going to work out? Was she going to force him to say it? Apparently she was. Okay, Emma, I'm sure you have a great personality, but when you post a picture of yourself on a dating site, it needs to look like you, not you 25 pounds ago. Emma's mouth dropped open. I can't believe you have the nerve to say that to me. First of all, it's shallow and offensive, but second of all, have you looked in a mirror lately? Feel free, they're everywhere in this place. Your picture online is at least 35 pounds ago. Did I notice that when you came in? Sure, but it didn't bother me. What does bother me is that you're a gigantic hypocrite. Fine. Well, I think the one thing we can mutually agree on is that this date is over. Matt stood up, and when he did, he heard an odd pop-pop sound, as though someone were making popcorn. Then he felt a cool breeze over his torso. Looking down, he realized that his bloated belly had caused all the buttons of his shirt to pop off, and was now exposed for the general public to see. Emma laughed. She laughed so hard she snorted. She laughed until her eyes watered. I can't believe it, she said between giggles. This is the best bad date ever. Wait till I tell my girlfriends. Matt tried to clutch his shirt closed and fled the premises. As soon as he hit the sidewalk, the pressure from his belly snapped his belt buckle, and he had to hold up his pants while his other hand kept them from falling down. He relinquished his grip on his shirt long enough to get to his car. He just needed to get home so this terrible night would be over. Back at his apartment, Matt changed into a baggy t-shirt and a pair of elastic-waisted pajama pants. Tomorrow he would have to go shopping for new clothes. But what could he wear while he shopped? Was he going to turn into one of those tacky people who wore pajamas in public? The pressure in his stomach was getting worse, and the weird knot in his head was hurting where it might be stretching the skin of his scalp. Maybe he had some medicine that might help him. He went to the kitchen, chewed up a couple of antacid tablets, and drank a glass of water. He waited for relief, but it didn't come. Instead, the pressure increased. Even the soft t-shirt he was wearing felt irritating. He took it off and looked down at his watermelon-shaped belly. The pressure from inside was pounding, pummeling. He looked at the skin of his belly. There was movement underneath. When he felt the pounding, a faint imprint of an indeterminate shape showed up on his skin. Matt stifled a scream as he realized the truth. Something was inside him, and it was trying to get out. The painful pounding became more insistent, a drumbeat of agony. If it was out of him, whatever it was, the pain would stop. Get it out, he thought, as he squeezed his eyes shut and clenched his jaw. He grabbed his discarded t-shirt and bit down on the fabric just to have some kind of outlet for the pain. If he got it out, the pain would stop. But how? There was no place for it to go. Another surge of pain hit him, this one crushing. He doubled over and grabbed the kitchen counter for support. His gaze turned to the kitchen knives hanging on a magnetic strip on the wall. He could cut it out. Cutting would relieve the pressure and get whatever it was out. He would be free of whatever this burden was. He wanted to be free. He grabbed the largest, sharpest kitchen knife and lay on his back on the floor. Starting the incision was the hardest part, but the pain inside him was greater than any pain he could cause himself. He sank the knife's tip into the top of his abdomen, and then drew the blade downward, biting down into the t-shirt so the neighbors wouldn't hear him scream. There was pain, but there was also relief. The pressure stopped, the blood flowed, and Matt saw, emerging from the incision, one long, green rabbit ear. The whole rabbit emerged, wet and slimy with mucus, a perfectly formed Springtrap the size of a healthy newborn infant. But unlike a newborn infant, the rabbit could pull itself out of the incision, land in a kneeling position on the kitchen floor, and then rise to stand. The blood loss was making Matt fade in and out of consciousness. But, even in his addled state, he could see that the creature spawned was Springtrap, but somehow not Springtrap. This one was realer, more organic than the one in the video game. Matt's mind drifted back to a story his mom had read to him when he was little, about a stuffed toy rabbit that wished so hard that it could be real. The spring trap that stood over Matt's bleeding body was not an amalgamation of code that somebody like him had programmed into a computer. This spring trap was real. The green rabbit sat down on the floor beside Matt and rested Matt's head in its furry lap. It felt nice. Matt was losing so much blood. Could a person lose this much blood and stay still alive? The rabbit stroked Matt's cheek. Matt didn't know if he heard the word come out of the rabbit's mouth, or if it was only in his head. Daddy. So you entered the apartment and you found him like this? The police officer was taking notes as they talked in the blood-drenched kitchen. Yes, officer. Jason was shaking, and you could feel his heart thudding in his chest. I was moving out of the apartment, and I came here at about 10 o'clock to get my stuff. 10 a.m., the officer asked. Yes, sir. I thought Matt would be at work, but instead I found him here. He heard the sob in his voice. He was trying to hold it together, but he wasn't succeeding. So you were roommates, but you were moving out of the apartment, the officer said. Had you had a disagreement? Yeah, kind of, but just a little one. Nothing that would lead me to do something like this. And I mean, I'm not a violent person. I could never do something like this anyway. Jason wished someone would cover up the body, but even when they did, he knew he wouldn't unsee it. Matt was gutted like a fish, his shirtless torso a gaping hole. Blood had gushed from the sides of the wound and now formed a large congealing puddle on the floor. The now bloody kitchen knife Jason had used countless times to chop vegetables was in Matt's lifeless hand. Did your roommate have any enemies? Anyone who would wish him ill? The officer asked. Well, I mean, Matt was a prickly guy, but he wasn't always the easiest person to get along with. But just because he could be annoying doesn't mean that anybody wanted him dead. The officer nodded. Had he shown any signs of depression or suicidal thoughts? I think he was kind of depressed, yeah, Jason said. He'd had a nasty divorce and breakups from a few rebound relationships after that. I also got the feeling there was a lot of stress at work, even though it wasn't the kind of person who would talk about that kind of thing much. Jason looked down at his friend's body. It was the last thing he wanted to see, so why did he keep looking at it? Why would someone do this to themselves? The officer looked up from his notes. Well, son, in my line of work, you never stop being surprised about what people are capable of. He looked down at the body, then squinted as if he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. He put on a plastic glove, then squatted on the floor, reaching for something. It was a clump of something green and fuzzy, like the artificial fur from a stuffed animal. Do you have any idea what this could be? The officer asked. Jason looked at the unfamiliar green fur. It was covered in an unpleasant slime, like a clear mucus. I have no idea, Jason said. The officer rolled slimy hairs between his finger and thumb, looking at them with apparent confusion, then shrugged and wiped his hand on a clean paper towel. The end. Man, I don't feel too bad about Matt. I mean, he was the literal worst, but that was still really intense. I'd say the ending was worth all the build-up throughout the entire story. Just weird, though, man. So, I mean, not only can we now say, from book 3, that Funtime Foxy being a taxi driver is now canon to the series, or not canon, but, it's in the series. We can now also say that a man has given birth to Springtrap at a certain point in this series. So, great. I love these books. But in all seriousness, it was a good story. I'd say this book is still definitely on track to being my favorite in the series. As long as the last story and then the Stitch Wraith story at the very end holds up. So we'll see, I guess. I'm really excited. I think I'm going to take a break now because I've just read 2 whole stories from here and I'm ready to take a break. But you can expect that the next story will be up probably tomorrow because these books are really good, man. What can I say? Thank you guys for watching. If you're new here, maybe subscribe. I've said this 3 times by now in each of these videos. It's just a thing that I have to do, As a YouTuber, I feel this weird compulsion to telling people to subscribe. I can't explain it. It just happens. Hopefully you feel a strange compulsion to subscribe. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.